They made me clean out my desk while Madison watched from her glass office. Security guard wouldn't even look me in the eye when he handed me the cardboard box. 21 years at Pierce Manufacturing, and I was getting walked out like some guy who'd been caught stealing staplers. I'm Ed Sullivan, 49 years old, and until 10 minutes ago I was Senior Operations Director at the place I'd helped build from a 50-person shop into a 150-employee manufacturing powerhouse. Now I was just another casualty of strategic restructuring. The security escort was Madison's touch. Madison Pierce, 29 years old, fresh MBA from Wharton, and daughter of the man who started this company in his garage back in 1987. She'd been CEO for 8 months and had been systematically removing anyone who remembered when her father actually worked the production line instead of just owning it. "Ed," she said through the glass, not bothering to come out. Just a wave and that practiced smile she probably learned in business school. "HR will be in touch about your transition package." Transition package. Like I was a product being discontinued. The walk to my car felt like a funeral march. People I'd worked with for decades suddenly found their computer screens fascinating. Maria from Accounts Payable gave me a sad little wave when Madison wasn't looking. Tom Jameson from the machine shop caught my eye and shook his head like he was watching a car crash in slow motion. Truth is, part of me wondered if Madison wasn't right about some things. The company had been doing things the same way for years. Our average worker was 47 years old. We still used paper forms for half our processes. Maybe I was holding back progress by insisting that methods that worked in 2010 would still work in 2024. But then I remembered the customer satisfaction scores, the safety record, the fact that we'd been profitable every quarter for the past 6 years while our competitors struggled with quality issues and supply chain problems. We weren't broke, so why were we trying to fix everything? I drove home in silence, thinking about what I was going to tell my wife Sarah. We'd been planning to pay off the mortgage in 3 years. Our daughter Emma was a sophomore at State, and our son Mike was looking at colleges. At 49, getting fired wasn't exactly a career pivot you could spin into something positive. But as I sat in my driveway, something else was bothering me. The timing of my termination, the way Madison had rushed through the paperwork, the fact that she'd brought in HR backup like she was expecting a fight. That afternoon, I called Janet Crawford. She'd been Pierce Manufacturing's outside counsel for 15 years before going into private practice. If anyone knew where the bodies were buried in the company's legal documents, it was Janet. "Ed," she said when I walked into her office, "I was wondering when I'd see you. You heard? Small town. Word travels fast." She pulled out a thick folder from her filing cabinet. "I've been doing some reading since I heard about the restructuring." Janet had that look lawyers get when they've found something interesting in the fine print. She opened the folder and pulled out copies of documents I hadn't seen in years. Remember the Hartwell Industries merger in 2007? I did remember. Pierce Manufacturing had been struggling after the 2006 recession. Hartwell Industries offered to acquire us, but Old Man Pierce had been worried about protecting his employees and company culture. The deal included all kinds of clauses about maintaining operations and protecting key personnel. "There's a succession protection clause buried in that agreement," Janet continued. Section 12.4, designed to prevent new management from gutting experienced operations staff without proper procedure. She showed me the relevant paragraph. Dense legal language, but the core was simple. If senior operations personnel were terminated without board approval and adequate severance, it triggered a 72-hour review period. If violations were confirmed, operational control would revert to whoever held the longest continuous tenure in operations management. "That would be me," I said, doing the math. Started as a floor supervisor in 2003, promoted to operations coordinator in 2006, senior operations director in 2010. 21 years total, all in operations. That would be you. The implications hit me like a freight train. Madison had fired me to get me out of the way. Instead, she might have just handed me the keys to the entire operation. "What's the deadline for filing?" Janet checked her notes. 72 hours from termination. You were terminated at 2:15 p.m. yesterday. That gives you until 2:15 p.m. Friday. 48 hours left. "Janet, I need to ask you something. Am I being vindictive here? Maybe Madison's right that people like me are anchors dragging the company backward." Janet closed the folder. Ed, I've seen the quarterly reports. Pierce Manufacturing has been consistently profitable under your operational management. Customer retention is high. Safety record is excellent. Employee satisfaction scores are above industry average. She paused. Sometimes change for the sake of change isn't progress. Sometimes it's just expensive. That evening, I called Tom Jameson. Tom had been at Pierce longer than anyone except me, and he'd been watching Madison's changes from the production floor. Ed, I was hoping you'd call. Things are getting weird around here. Weird how? Madison brought in efficiency experts today. They're timing assembly cycles with stopwatches, talking about automation and workforce optimization. Tom's voice dropped. Word is she's planning to outsource half the production line to some facility in Mexico. That explained the rush to clean house. Madison wasn't just modernizing operations. She was preparing to gut them. Replace experienced workers with automated systems and offshore labor. There's something else, Tom continued. She called an all-hands meeting for Monday. Agenda says exciting announcements about Pierce Manufacturing's future. I had a feeling those exciting announcements would involve pink slips for anyone over 40. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the merger documents spread out in front of me. Sarah brought me coffee and looked over my shoulder at the legal language. What are you thinking about doing? I'm thinking about reminding Madison that sometimes when you try to throw out the old, you throw out the foundation along with it. But here's what made me nervous. Filing this claim wasn't just about getting my job back. If it worked, I'd essentially be staging a corporate coup, taking operational control away from the CEO. That was serious business, and if I was wrong about Madison's plans, I'd look like a power-hungry old fool seeking revenge. The next morning, I drove by the office early. Saw Madison's car in the parking lot at 6:30 a.m., which was unusual. Through the lobby windows, I could see her in the conference room with 3 people I didn't recognize, all suits, all serious faces, all taking notes while she pointed at charts on the wall. That decided it for me. Friday morning at 9 a.m., I walked into the county clerk's office with a notarized succession claim. Certified copies went to every board member via courier. Electronic filing with the state corporate commission. Everything time-stamped and documented. I made one stop on the way home. Janet's office, to drop off copies of everything. Ed, she said, reviewing the paperwork. You realize what you've just set in motion? I think so. The board will have to call an emergency meeting. Madison will fight this with everything she's got. And if you're wrong about her intentions, then I'll be the guy who destroyed his own career over a grudge. Janet nodded. But if you're right, then I might just save 150 jobs in a company that took 37 years to build. The 72-hour countdown had begun. Now I just had to wait for the phone to ring and hope I hadn't just made the biggest mistake of my life. That evening, Sarah found me on the back porch, staring at my phone. Having second thoughts? She asked. Third and fourth thoughts, I admitted. What if I'm just a bitter old man who can't accept change? She sat down beside me. Ed, in 21 years, how many times have you been wrong about what's best for that company? I thought about it. Not often. Then trust your instincts. And whatever happens, we'll figure it out together. The phone stayed quiet that night. But I knew Monday morning would be a different story. The call came at 6:47 a.m. Monday morning. Madison's assistant sounded like she'd rather be anywhere else. Mr. Sullivan? Ms. Pierce needs to see you immediately. The entire board of directors will be present. I was sitting on my back porch with coffee, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my career. Tell Ms. Pierce I'm no longer employed by Pierce Manufacturing. She'll need to go through my attorney. Sir, she said it's extremely urgent regarding legal documents delivered over the weekend. Board meetings didn't happen on Monday mornings unless something was seriously wrong. I can be there at 10 a.m. The parking lot felt different when you weren't rushing to beat the time clock. Gary, the security guard who'd escorted me out, looked embarrassed and muttered about just following orders. The boardroom was packed. Madison sat at the head looking like she'd spent the weekend on energy drinks and panic. Every board member was there, faces I'd known for 20 years. Janet Crawford sat in the corner with her folders, playing it professional. Board Chairman Mike Torres opened the meeting. Ed, we need to discuss this succession clause filing. Madison jumped in immediately. This is ridiculous, Mike. We can't let one disgruntled employee hold the company hostage over legal technicalities. It's not a technicality, Janet said quietly. It's a binding contract provision designed to prevent exactly what happened here. Torres leaned forward. Madison, walk us through Ed's termination rationale. Madison pulled out her tablet. Ed represented legacy thinking preventing necessary modernization. Our metrics showed inefficiencies requiring immediate restructuring. What specific inefficiencies? Asked Linda Walsh. Paper-based processes, outdated equipment, resistance to automation. We're falling behind competitors embracing Industry 4.0 principles. Torres frowned. But our profit margins are strong. Customer satisfaction is high. What exactly were we falling behind in? Madison's confidence wavered. It's about positioning for future market demands. I couldn't stay quiet. What future demands, Madison? Our customers are happy with quality and delivery. We're profitable and growing. What problem were you solving? We can't stay competitive clinging to 20-year-old methods. Every major manufacturer is automating. We need strategic thinking. I've been thinking strategically for 21 years, I said. Strategic thinking means understanding what needs changing versus what just looks good in PowerPoint. The room went quiet. Janet opened her folder. The succession clause is valid. Ed's termination violated procedural requirements in the 2007 merger agreement. Unless the board overturns the termination by 2:15 p.m. today, operational control reverts to the designated successor. And that's Ed, Torres said. Madison looked around the table like seeing these people for the first time. You're overriding my decision based on 17-year-old paperwork? Brad Hayes spoke up. Madison, your father insisted on these protections during the Hartwell merger. He worried about exactly this situation. My father built this company. He'd want it to evolve, not stagnate under legacy management. Something snapped inside me. Legacy management? I helped your father build the systems you're eager to destroy. Those paper processes? They're why we haven't had customer complaints in 18 months. That outdated equipment? It's running at 94% efficiency without missing deadlines. She stared back. Those metrics don't account for opportunity costs. We could do better with modern systems. Or we could be like Henderson Manufacturing. They automated everything 2 years ago. Now they're at 73% efficiency, laid off half their workforce, and lost 3 major contracts because quality control failed. Torres looked at Madison. Is that where you want to take us? Henderson made implementation mistakes. With proper planning and consulting partners, we can avoid those issues. Consulting partners, Linda Walsh repeated. How much were you planning to spend on modernization? Madison hesitated. The initial automation package was $2.8 million over 2 years. Dead silence. For our company size, that was enormous. $2.8 million to automate processes already working efficiently, Torres said slowly, to future-proof operations and reduce labor costs. By eliminating how many positions, Hayes asked. Approximately 40 initially. I did the math aloud. $70,000 per eliminated worker. You're spending $70,000 to fire each person, not counting lost experience and knowledge. Madison's face reddened. Those workers could be retrained for higher value roles. What higher value roles? You're automating their expertise. What exactly do you retrain a 52-year-old machine operator to become? No answer. Janet checked her watch. 4 hours left in the 72-hour window. The board needs to decide. Torres looked around the table, all in favor of overturning Ed's termination and restoring his position. Hands went up. Not all, but more than half. Madison stared at the raised hands. This is insane. Motion passes, Torres announced. Ed, you're reinstated immediately. Janet wasn't finished. The succession clause doesn't just restore Ed's position. Given the merger violations, it triggers a 90-day operational review period. The designated successor has authority to restructure operations as needed. The implications hit like a bomb. Restructure how? Madison asked quietly. I'd thought about this all weekend. First, we're canceling the automation contract. All consulting agreements for operational restructuring are terminated. Madison went white. You can't undo everything. We have commitments. 30-day cancellation clause if operational requirements change, Janet said. New COO counts as changed requirements. Second, we're reviewing every personnel change from the last 6 months. People pushed out unfairly get their jobs back. You're destroying months of work, Madison said. I'm preserving 21 years of work. Torres nodded. Sounds reasonable. The meeting broke up with uncomfortable handshakes. Madison left without goodbyes. Board members filed out looking relieved. Linda Walsh pulled me aside. "Ed, you realize what you've done. You're essentially the most powerful person in this company for 90 days. She was right. And I had plans for those 90 days. Walking out, I caught sight of Madison through her new office window. She was on her phone gesturing frantically, probably calling those consulting partners to explain why their $2.8 million payday just evaporated. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Pierce Manufacturing was going to survive Madison's revolution. But now came the hard part, proving I could do better than just stopping bad decisions. I had to make good ones. The first thing I did was call Tom Jameson into my office. Madison's old office, actually. She'd moved herself down to a smaller space near accounting, probably hoping nobody would notice the demotion. Tom knocked and walked in like he was entering a crime scene. "Ed, what the hell just happened?" I explained the succession clause while Tom shook his head. "So Madison basically fired herself? More like she fired me right into her job." I paused. "Tom, I need you to be honest. Am I doing the right thing?" Maybe Madison had valid points about modernization. Tom was quiet for a minute. "You want to know what I saw last week? Those efficiency experts timing our assembly cycles with stopwatches. Made guys who've done this job for 15 years nervous as hell. Productivity dropped 8% that day, but the consultants wrote that our workers were resistant to measurement and needed performance coaching. That helped ease my doubts, but I felt the weight of 150 people's livelihoods on my shoulders. "What's the plan?" Tom asked. "First, we're bringing back everyone pushed out in the last 6 months, starting with Danny Flores from Quality Control. Danny had been at Pierce for 12 years, knew every piece of equipment intimately. Madison replaced him with a college graduate who thought quality control meant statistical reports. Within 2 weeks, we'd had our first customer complaints in 18 months. Danny's at Morrison Machine now," Tom said. "Not anymore. He starts Wednesday." But bringing Danny back created an unexpected problem. The college kid Madison hired, Kevin Walsh, was actually smart. He'd implemented digital tracking systems that were genuinely useful. Firing him just to bring Danny back would make me look petty and wasteful. So I didn't fire him. I made Danny quality control supervisor and kept Kevin as quality systems analyst. Danny got his experience and relationships back, Kevin kept developing his skills, and we got the best of both worlds. It was a small decision, but it taught me something important. This wasn't about undoing everything Madison had done. It was about separating good ideas from bad execution. By Friday, I'd called 8 former employees. 6 were coming back. The 2 who declined had found better situations, which I respected. But the returnees brought 90 years of combined experience and relationships with every major supplier and customer. Janet Crawford handled canceling the automation contract. Cost us a $50,000 penalty, but saved $2.8 million on equipment we didn't need. Madison tried fighting back. She scheduled meetings with individual board members, building support for her strategic vision. But feedback came through Tom and other connections. "She's telling people you're sabotaging the company's future," Tom reported. "Says you're preventing modernization out of personal spite." That stung, because part of me worried it might be true. Was I being stubborn, clinging to familiar methods because change scared me? The test came 3 weeks later when Richardson Industries called with an emergency. Their regular supplier had equipment problems. They needed 2,000 custom assemblies in 10 days. It was exactly the challenge that would prove whether Madison's lean staffing or my experience-heavy model worked better. Under Madison's streamlined organization, we'd have turned down the order or subcontracted half the work. With our experienced team back, I thought we could handle it. But thinking and doing are different things. Danny Flores worked with floor supervisors to reconfigure 2 production lines. Tom pulled weekend shifts from the machine shop. I called in favors with 3 suppliers for expedited materials. The first few days were rough. Equipment breakdowns, material delays, quality issues. By day 5, we were 12 hours behind schedule. That's when Madison showed up on the production floor. She didn't approach me, just walked around talking to workers, observing the controlled chaos of a rush order. Later that day, she knocked on my office door. "Ed, can we talk?" She sat across from my desk, looking tired rather than angry. "Are you going to make the Richardson deadline?" "We'll make it," I said, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. I've been thinking about Henderson Manufacturing. I waited. I called their operations director yesterday, asked about their automation experience. Madison looked uncomfortable. You were right. Quality issues, workforce disruption, customer complaints. They're still struggling to recover. Automation isn't automatically bad, Madison. It's about timing and implementation. I know that now. She was quiet. I may have been trying to change too much too fast. It was the closest to an apology I'd get, and probably more than I deserved for some of my harsh words. Why did you really want to automate everything? I asked. She sighed. Because I was scared. Scared the board thought I wasn't qualified. Scared I'd inherited a company I didn't understand. I thought dramatic improvements would prove I belonged here. For the first time since taking over, Madison sounded human instead of like a business school case study. Your father built this company over 30 years, I said. He didn't revolutionize everything at once. He made steady improvements while keeping what worked. We finished the Richardson order in 8 days. Richardson Industries was so impressed they offered us a 3-year contract extension worth $4.2 million annually. The success created momentum for other changes. We did upgrade equipment over the following months, implemented better inventory tracking, even brought in limited automation for repetitive assembly work. The difference was strategic implementation. We upgraded systems that genuinely needed improvement while preserving processes that already worked. We enhanced what we were doing instead of replacing it entirely. Madison and I developed an uneasy but functional working relationship. She focused on strategic planning, customer relationships, and external partnerships. I handled operations, production, and internal management. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. 6 months later, Pierce Manufacturing posted its best quarterly results in company history: 18% revenue growth, 22% profit margin improvement, and customer satisfaction scores higher than we'd ever measured. Madison presented those numbers at the Industry Trade Association conference. She talked about sustainable growth through strategic modernization and experienced leadership integration. I had to admit, she'd learned to speak the language of corporate success without destroying what made it possible. The 90-day review period ended with the board making our arrangement permanent. I became Chief Operating Officer with equity participation. Madison remained CEO with clearer understanding of what she could and couldn't change. Sometimes at meetings, I'd catch her watching me handle operational issues with something like respect. Other times, I'd see her presenting strategic initiatives with genuine enthusiasm instead of desperate overcompensation. We'd both learn something crucial. Experience without adaptation becomes stagnation. Innovation without foundation becomes chaos. The trick is finding balance. And sometimes, the best way to find that balance is pushing each other hard enough to discover what really matters. The real test came 8 months later when Consolidated Industries tried poaching our biggest accounts. They'd been underbidding us by 15% across the board, promising faster delivery times and better technology integration. Classic predatory pricing to steal market share. Madison brought the threat to my attention during our weekly operational review. Ed, we're losing Richardson if we can't match their pricing. They're offering assemblies for $425 each instead of our $500. I ran the numbers. At $425 per unit, we'd operate at 3% margin instead of our usual 18%, sustainable for maybe 6 months before we'd start cutting costs elsewhere. What's Consolidated's strategy? I asked. They're betting we can't compete with their automated production lines. Their sales rep told Richardson they can deliver 2,000 units in 5 days versus our usual 10. This was exactly what Madison had worried about when she pushed for automation. A competitor using technology to undercut our traditional methods. Can they actually deliver what they're promising? Madison pulled up data on her tablet. Their facility videos look impressive. Fully automated assembly lines, digital quality control, AI-driven inventory. Management. I studied the information. Something didn't add up. Look at their customer retention numbers. They've landed 12 new major accounts in 18 months, but lost 8 existing ones. What does that tell you? They're great at winning bids, but terrible at keeping customers happy long term. We decided on something that would have been impossible under Madison's original automation plan or my stubborn resistance to change. We'd compete on reliability and relationship, not just price. I called Richardson's operations director directly. Jim, it's Ed Sullivan at Pierce. I hear Consolidated's been making interesting offers. Ed, you know I hate this conversation. We've worked together for 6 years, but their numbers are compelling. I understand. What's driving the decision? Just price or other factors? Jim was quiet. Honestly, mostly price. But they're also promising faster turnaround. What happens if they can't deliver on those promises? What's your backup plan? We'd have to find another supplier quickly. Expensive and disruptive. I made a proposal that surprised even myself. What if we could match their price on a trial basis, but with guaranteed delivery times and our usual quality standards? 6-month trial. If we miss a deadline or have quality issues, you can switch to Consolidated with no penalty. Madison stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Matching Consolidated's price would eliminate most of our profit margin on Richardson's business, but Jim was interested. You'd really match their pricing? For 6 months, yes. But I need a guarantee you'll evaluate the total experience, not just price per unit. We got the trial agreement. Madison pulled me aside after the call. Ed, that's financial suicide. We can't operate at 3% margins. We're not going to operate at 3% margins, I said. We're going to prove Consolidated can't deliver what they're promising. When they fail, Richardson will pay our regular prices to avoid the risk. It was a gamble based on experience rather than spreadsheet analysis. I'd seen predatory pricing strategies before. Companies would win business with unsustainable bids, then either raise prices after customers were locked in or cut corners to maintain margins. The strategy paid off 3 months later. Consolidated missed 2 delivery deadlines for one of their major customers, then delivered a batch with quality issues requiring expensive rework. Word spread quickly through our industry network. Richardson's operations director called me directly. Ed, we want to extend our contract at your regular pricing. Consolidated's saving us money, but they're costing us reliability. Within 6 months, we'd won back 2 accounts that had switched to Consolidated, plus landed 3 new customers burned by similar experiences with low-bid competitors. The experience taught both Madison and me something important about competition. You don't win by becoming exactly like your competitors. You win by being better at what makes you different. Madison started focusing her strategic planning on relationship building and service differentiation, rather than technology automation. She developed supplier partnerships that gave us better material pricing and faster delivery times. She created customer service protocols that made us easier to work with than larger competitors. I started selectively implementing technology upgrades that improved our core strengths rather than trying to automate everything. Digital inventory tracking that reduced material waste. Quality monitoring systems that caught problems before they became customer complaints. Predictive maintenance that eliminated unexpected equipment failures. 18 months after my termination and reinstatement, Pierce Manufacturing was a different company. Not radically transformed, but strategically evolved. We'd grown from 150 to 180 employees. Customer satisfaction scores were company history highs. Profit margins had improved 24% through operational efficiency and pricing discipline. Madison presented our results at the National Manufacturing Association Conference. Her presentation was titled Sustainable Growth Through Strategic Evolution, Balancing Innovation with Institutional Knowledge. Watching her present, I realized she'd become the kind of leader her father would have been proud of. Someone who could speak modern business language while understanding the fundamentals that made business work. After the conference, we flew back together. Madison was reviewing notes from other presentations. Ed, I owe you an apology, she said. For what? For thinking experience was the enemy of progress, for believing changing everything was the same as improving everything. I was quiet for a minute. Madison, I owe you an apology too, for assuming all change was bad change, for being so protective of old ways that I couldn't see when new approaches might actually help. She smiled. You know what's funny? If you hadn't filed that succession clause, I probably would have run the company into the ground within 2 years. And if you hadn't pushed for modernization, we probably would have been stuck doing things the same way until some competitor really did make us obsolete. So we both needed each other to fail a little before we could succeed together? Something like that. These days, when new employees ask me about career advice, I tell them what my experience with Madison taught me. The goal isn't to resist change or embrace it blindly. The goal is understanding what's worth preserving and what's worth improving. Sometimes that means filing succession clauses to stop bad decisions from destroying good companies. Sometimes it means admitting that the way you've always done things isn't the only way to do them. But mostly it means remembering that businesses aren't just numbers on spreadsheets or processes in flowcharts. They're communities of people trying to create something valuable together. And when you're trying to build something that lasts, you need both the wisdom to know what works and the courage to imagine what might work better. The last laugh isn't about proving you were right all along. It's about being smart enough to learn from being wrong and generous enough to help others do the same.